as a staff member of the National Museum of American Diplomacy, which is a part of the State Department, our mission and goal, and who knew that the State Department does have a museum dedicated to sharing the stories of American diplomacy. And that is in part because we feel that not enough domestic audiences, those who live in the United States, know about the State Department or know about their work, right? And how we engage internationally with other countries. What does that mean? What are the issues? So we feel that it's, very important to bring this content to a domestic audience and to help our youth better understand how our country is involved in international relations, to build a constituency, to help them better ask questions of an elected official in terms of policies. We are not here to promote policies. We are here to simply introduce who we are, what we do, why we do it, where we do it, and to really talk about and discuss this process of diplomacy and the practice. And it gets to a little bit of what was discussed. I mean, and a big part of that are the skills and tools of diplomacy, as we like to refer to them, which of course is about listening and communicating, empathizing, and understanding that there are lots of different perspectives to a situation, and that that's an important role that a diplomat plays, which is to kind of understand, know, analyze situations, understand the different perspectives, and to work respectfully, advancing goals. So we have developed a program that helps to kind of invite students into practice some of what a diplomat does. So thank you for welcoming us. I hope we can kind of link to some of the other sessions that you've been doing in terms of conflict resolution, but how do we ultimately work together to solve problems?
And Lauren, I'm looking forward to the day that we can actually visit you again.
Me too.
I mean, we had thought about it would be this year, and then again, no.
Yeah, we're not quite there yet, but hopefully in a year that will be the case. And so I look forward to that. Yes, yeah, absolutely. And then Sonia Erbaum, who is a Foreign Service Officer, she's joining us here today. She has served our country abroad for the last 20 years. And she's currently working with us developing programs to, further expand what the museum is doing with domestic audiences. So I have a PowerPoint. Normally we do, as David mentioned, we do a simulation as a way of encouraging you to think about this program with your students. We're just gonna talk. We're gonna talk it through, and I'm gonna share some resources with you. But we're really about teaching diplomacy. Why is this important? Well, it's important just because we feel it's really important that our youth, our public, understand how our world, how the United States, is working in the world. For our youth, we find that introducing this notion of diplomacy is really about preparing them for, career opportunities, and to think about, a profession within diplomacy, whether it's with the government or non-governmental work, for them to get excited about participating in their own communities or their own country. We also feel like with the National Council for the Social Studies, they have the C3 framework that was really about career readiness, and learning how to work together to solve problems. With with the kinds of programs we do, especially the simulation program, we've really aligned with all of this. And it's about the global competence, right? It's about helping to educate our youth to be better global citizens, right? This is at the heart of what we're doing. We have a diplomacy simulation program that is on our website, the materials for which are free. At the conclusion of my slides, I will take you to the website so you yourself can see where you can find these materials. We also have instructional videos, or rather instructional documents that help you think about how to facilitate these with your students. And we also have some subject matter expert videos as well. But basically, our simulations are designed for a group of students, anywhere between 18 and 30 students. They all read a common scenario. So they all know what the situation is. We have hypothetical simulations and we have 3 new historical ones. And they are broken into, the class is broken into 5 or 6 what we call stakeholder groups. And that group represents a country or an organization. They're given a role sheet that helps them understand their interests or their perspective into that scenario. And it's from that role that they play that they advocate for what they want in the simulation, which is a negotiated multilateral meeting. What we want our audience to come away with is to know what the State Department is, have a sense of the job of diplomats, to understand what this word foreign policy is, what that means, the idea of diplomacy and what it is and the nuances involved, the skills, so think about the skills and the tools our diplomats use in doing their work, and to have a better understanding of why or how global issues abroad and why it's important that we engage in them, and how those global challenges, although seemingly across the planet, impact us here at home. It's within our interests of our own security and prosperity to work with others to solve and address these global challenges around the world. So what I'd like to do is just offer the ways in which we introduce the simulation to students. And this is for you, so you can learn how you could introduce a simulation to your own students. The slides that I'm going to go through, we actually have on our website. They're available for you they're in Google Slides. You yourself can open them up and use those slide decks to guide your own introduction to a simulation that you may facilitate. So we're going to go through that next. Then I'm going to, which includes what the ideas of skills and tools of diplomacy, because ultimately at the heart of this program is asking the students to be that diplomat. And so we want to introduce what those skills and tools are to them. And then I'm going to focus a little bit about what does it mean for you to facilitate? What does it mean for you to guide that process with your students? So these are the 3 components that we're gonna look at today. But before I do, if anyone, I can't see you as well because I'm sharing my screen, but if anyone has a question up to this point, feel free. You can unmic yourself. Does anyone have a question? We're good. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and advance. So again, this is the simulation introduction, which is a really important part of introducing to your students, because you want them to, they need to know what's expected of them, right? And we start big because we really are talking about the State Department, but we want to talk about the federal government. There are 3 branches: executive, legislative, and judicial. We're focusing in on that legislative branch because we're going to talk about federal agencies, right? We have these federal agencies that are sort of overseen by the elected president, and these agencies sort of administer and oversee the function of our federal government. There are many, like Department of Defense, Department of Education, let me see what else, Department of Labor, Department of Commerce, Department of Justice. So these are not all that often unfamiliar to students. Department of State can sometimes be. It's like, Department of what state are you talking about? Well, we're talking about the US Department of State, that federal agency, which is actually the oldest federal agency. We were first created as soon as our Constitution was ratified, in that because our job is to maintain those international relationships between the United States and other countries, okay? And we do so with our foreign service officers that work both here in the United States as well as abroad. They move around the world. They have different posts, which can be in our US embassies and consulates and missions around the world. They also serve here in DC. We have civil servants like myself who work in DC. And then we also have what are called locally employed staff, which are citizens of a host country that's hosting our US embassy that support the efforts of that US embassy in that country. So we're around the world. We work 24/7 to support the safety and security of the United States and other countries. So this is the job of the State Department. And we do that in lots of different ways. Diplomats have lots of different jobs in terms of promoting American businesses abroad, working with that host government to make sure and to coordinate different treaties, to bring sort of who we are as the United States into that country, to help those citizens better understand who the United States is. And our another goal is to promote what does it mean to be a part of a democratic country, democratic government, democratic society. So this is what we're doing around the world. And we want our participants to learn and gain a better understanding of all of that. But as I've mentioned, the heart of this is stepping into the role of the diplomat, being exposed to what does it mean to sit at a table with people who do not agree with your point of view, have competing interests, and how do you listen and share and articulate and find that common ground, practice diplomacy, building and maintaining relationships, and doing this while respecting each other and all that which everyone brings to the table. So this is what we call diplomacy. And this is at the heart of what we're asking students to practice. Within a simulation, which is really guided by you, but it's also really more about the students and what they bring and how they choose to make their choices and practice the skills. They may debate at times, but this is really not about debating and figuring out who's the smartest in the room. That's really not what this is about. This is about understanding what you want, knowing what I want, finding where those interests overlap, and how can we work together to figure out a solution and put us on a path to solving that. Okay, so those slides that I've just showed you are available on our website. You can have access to those slides to make that introduction to your students and sort of introducing a little bit about who the State Department is. But now let's look at the process and the practice and what we're asking and inviting our students to practice when they're doing the simulation. And those are the skills and tools of diplomacy. We have really kind of zeroed in on 9 skills, which really are organized under what we call 3 buckets. And these skills have been really drawn upon from what the State Department calls the 13 dimensions of what they look for in a diplomat. And so from those 13 dimensions, we've really kind of distilled it to these things, which are also in alignment with those 21st century skills, and it's very much a part of the C3 framework as well. And I like to start in this informational corner because it's really about what are the facts, what's going on, what's happening on the ground, filtering out all whatever fake news might be there. That's not where a diplomat is, listening and spending their time. They're really trying to find out and analyzing and best understanding what is going on and all the different perspectives that might be a part of an event that's happening on the ground. That awareness that they need to know, it's all those different perspectives, and realizing and knowing that all those perspectives are valid, right? And that everyone deserves to be at that table and deserves to be heard. And it's about those communication skills. It's articulating what I want, but it's also knowing that the question asking and the listening and the understanding what others want is just as important, because that's really how it's all going to flow to that relational piece at the top of the triangle. Because once you know what others want, you have a better chance of being able to collaborate and work together and understand where those interests overlap. And it's also being, that's not to say it's easy. And so having that sense of composure, having that sense of patience, is really important, and it's a really important part of that respect, right? I'm going to be composed as I listen to what you want, even though if I completely disagree with it. But it's really key to successful problem solving. And it's knowing the right time to be the leader, because you might be that party that is not a part of an impasse, but you're asked to come in and broker and to help ease. And it's knowing the best, the appropriate time to step in and help to soften situations, and knowing when it's time to step up and serve in that leadership role. And then, of course, it's operational, right? It's knowing that although we have all of these ideas and we've identified certain actions and tasks, we need to make it work. We need to make it so we know how to use our resources, our monies appropriately, and in the best way to achieve what it is that we want to achieve. Advocate for what we want and advocate for the best possible outcome. And know that it's also really important that we remain creative, that we remain flexible, that even though we're attempting to solve a problem in a certain way, if something goes wrong, how can we be flexible and adjust? That requires us to be innovative, and that, all of these skills kind of interweave with each other, because that often requires composure when things don't go right or according to plan, and it requires you to be innovative and just to accept that is part of the process. So we really like to present these as our skills, and that students to be mindful of what these are, because as they engage in the sim, we want them to exercise these skills. We want them to be able to, at the end of the experience, to reflect upon how they used any of these skills, or what they felt like they could have used more, what skills they could have used more effectively, or what skills they need to strengthen. It's also really important for me to know that it's good for students to, if they have a goal of becoming a diplomat or working in this space, that it's not just about what degree you have or what courses you take. It's knowing the skills that you need to hone and to practice. And that as they meet professionals in the field, to be able to ask those questions as well in terms of communication and best problem solving practices. So diplomats use these skills, they practice these skills, and yet when they are working with others, it's also about drawing upon what resources they have to apply to help solve a problem, whether it's through a treaty, whether it's through a formal agreement, whether it's offering military support or cooperation. It's knowing what's in that little toolbox of a diplomat that is, defined by their country and their government. And so having our students understand that these are the tools which are applied to help solve a problem. And any of these tools could be used in a way as a carrot, as an incentive, or as a stick, as a disincentive. What's going to motivate someone to work with you and to find that solution? And these are all things that we invite students to do. All right. You know what, I can't even see what this says because of where my picture is. What does this say? Okay, got it, the process. All right, so those set of slides that I just went through, which is introducing the State Department, introducing the skills and the tools, those are all on our website. Again, those are there for you. So as you prepare your own students for a simulation, that deck is there for you to draw upon as a resource. Before I talk about what does it mean to facilitate, I just want to make sure and just open up for if anyone has a thought or a question right now. Just because I know we don't get to do the sim today, I just want to make some space for any questions that anyone has. And feel free to unmic yourself if there's a question in the chat, because I can't see it. Okay, so how do you do this? How do you bring this to your students in your classroom? And let me just say this program is used by high school teachers. It's used by community college professors. It's used by graduate professors who teach graduate students. I love our simulation program because it's very flexible. It's really about what the students bring to the experience. I also love doing a lot of civil society type groups like World Affairs Councils or international visitor leadership programs, or those type organizations that work with youth. A lot of them have used this program as a way of engaging and creating a conversation around problem solving and how we work in the world. So how will you do this? What do you need to do to bring this in to your students? We do have our materials, as I mentioned, on our website. So you would download those and distribute or share those digitally, but they need to be shared with the students ahead of time. You need to be able to divide that group of students into those stakeholder groups ahead of time, and make sure that those groups have the particular role sheet they need. We've intentionally have created a simulation program that can be done within a 2-hour time frame. We didn't want to create something that took days to do and days to prepare for, because we know that teachers and high school teachers in particular, they have so much to do and accomplish. We really wanted to create a program that was easy for them to do over a class or 2 class periods of time. And therefore the reading for the students isn't dense or isn't long. And we've done that intentionally. So your job is to kind of get that information, make whatever copies you need or distribute it, make sure they're read and they're prepped. And if possible, that those little stakeholder groups can get together and start to talk about what their positions are. Our simulation program started many years ago, and it actually was it was done in a classroom environment or live, right? And then of course in March of 2020, we, like everyone else, started to think about how we could shift and offer some online programming. And so we now have offer the simulation and train instructors to use the simulation virtually. So these 3 moves that the students alternate between happen both in the live environment as well as in the virtual environment. The first move is called the stakeholder meeting. It's just that group who is on the same team has an opportunity to talk about what it is that they want in their position, who their allies are, who they want to talk to, what they're asking for, how angry they are, how they want to motivate others to work with them. So that's what's happened in that stakeholder meeting. It's a private meeting. In Zoom, it happens in a chat room. In a live environment, it just happens in the corner of the room around an individual table that they share. The formal discussion happens in the Zoom room like this, where it's a formal negotiation, it's a formal meeting. They all sit together, they all offer statements, they all ask questions of each other, they hear what each other's saying. It's very transparent what's happening in this formal discussion, okay? The negotiating room happens in Zoom in a chat room, and in the live environment, it's a self-organized move around the room where students talk away from the table with the other stakeholder groups. These are privately held conversations. Not all stakeholder groups are a part of those conversations. You might have your stakeholder group break up and individuals talk one-on-one with someone from another organization or country. And that's really where some of this real work happens. They've made some proposals at that formal meeting, but in these informal negotiating spaces, they're really doing these sidebar, diplomacy, and they're making sort of these decisions together. They're forming alliances. In the virtual environment, these negotiating rooms are chat rooms, and they have one representative from every stakeholder group in there. So it's a little more contrived than in the physical experience. And we're learning and we're thinking about how to make that a little bit more flexible in the virtual space. But ultimately, these are the 3 moves, and this is how the group sort of they sort of move between them. What we're asking the students to do is to know what they want, to know what their overall goal is and what they want to achieve. But in that overall goal of what they want to achieve, there's actions that need to take place, and there could be multiple actions. They have to know what those actions are that they want to achieve. For example, in our refugee simulation, where you have refugees from one country on the border trying to get into the neighboring country, where there is already a refugee camp presided over the UNHCR. Some of what the country's priority actions are making sure those refugees have clean water, that there's vaccines, that the flow of the refugees from the other country slow down, or that the other country where the refugees come, that government address the issue and problem in their own country. So there's all these goals that have to become actions, and that's what they need to figure out, because that action needs to become accomplishable. So they have to think about what's needed in terms of resources, money, and supplies. They have to know who can help them. They have to know what problems they could encounter along the way and to expect that. Or they have to know how quickly this needs to be resolved. So it's about asking them to be as specific as possible with how they can accomplish that action, because it's in that specificity that they address with their other counterparts that's where the negotiation can really get exciting, is where they're asking for specific things, whether it's resources or support or speed to help them accomplish something quickly. That as specific as they can be, that really helps to drive the conversation among the groups. So that's what you guide them to do, right? So in a minute, this is going to make a little bit more sense, because I am going to go through the introduction of the simulation and the moves in the agenda, like you would set the students up to do. Before I get there, let me just talk about your job, right? You've distributed the materials, you've got them into their small groups, they've done a little prep, they've read, you've maybe talked a little bit about the issue at hand. So now they're getting ready, and you're going to tell them how these moves are going to look in an agenda. Just know that there's no right or wrong to this program, right? It's really about the process. If they don't get to a solution at the end of the time, we don't expect them to. It's about knowing the skills that they're using and as they work together, because it's really diplomacy is at the heart of this program. Your job is to encourage them to articulate, to work with each other, and to get them to drive the energy in the conversation. You're there to actively listen. It's really important that you take some notes. It's really important that if you're listening and a team is really putting out some really great actionable items that you really want to stress, you can sort of mirror back for the group. I hear that this particular stakeholder group is asking for money from the United States to support the vaccine work, to improve the restroom conditions for women and girls, to bring in and some toys for the young children in the camp. So if they're being specific and you want to be able to highlight that and model for the other groups what an appropriate actionable item is that can be discussed further, that's your job, is to help highlight that for the group. You are not a part of the conversation, but you can call on others, right, to kind of keep order of the discussion. If someone says something that is very confusing, you can certainly ask them to clarify, because if it's, if it's confusing for you, it's most likely confusing for others. If there's a lot of debate going on and it's clear through the debate that they're not getting anywhere, they're not finding that common ground, they're not getting to actionable items, they're just not moving along because they're still stuck in defining a term like refugee, or who should be sitting at the table, even everyone is there. Sometimes they can't get past very basic things, which is fine, but you want to be able to help them see where they're not moving forward into any kind of solution making because they're stuck. That's your job, to help them move past that. The more you use the program, the easier it becomes to facilitate. Obviously, no two simulations are alike. It's like a script, right? You have the students that take on these roles and create their own experience, which is always, always a lot of fun. And I stress the fun. It can be sometimes stressful for the students because these are under time constraints, as you will see the agenda in a minute. Things move along quickly. They can be confused in moments, and that's all part of design. It's all part of for them to feel like, wow, there's a lot happening here. I'm processing a lot. There's a lot of ideas. And so that's part of design. All right, so those are some tips. Everybody good? How am I doing on time, David?
If we finish up about 2 and you take 15 minutes of questions, that would be good, but we can go beyond 2.
Oh, okay, perfect. Okay, so I'm just going to run through a few more slides. These slides also we have on our slide on our website to help you introduce how the moves look for your students, right? So we're going to use our international migration crisis as the model here today. And then the only bit of content that is important in this simulation is knowing what a refugee is, that definition, which is here. You are playing, here are the roles at the table today. You can see that we have 3 hypothetical countries, Gilbia, Bhutan, and Malil. State Department is always a player in our hypothetical sims because I want folks to know what the State Department is. We usually have an NGO at the table. In this case, it's our Association for Refugees and Minority. Again, it's a fabricated NGO. And then we have the UN often at the table as well. Their job, and this is built into the materials which are on our website, is to think about these possible solutions and goals that they can have to bring to the table and actions that can come out of those goals. And we give them some ideas of what these solutions could be that are a part of the materials. But of course, you have to select a solution in accordance with the role you play, right? Because they're by design, they're a little all over the place. They kind of span the spectrum. They need to figure out a goal and a solution that they would advocate for that fits their interests. You will be filling these different moves today. We've talked about what those are in the previous slide, but I'm going to show you what this looks like in an agenda, where the introduction that you are offering that sets them up, that prepares them, is about 15 minutes. Prior to your introduction, they will have been put into the stakeholder groups. They will have read the materials. You're just helping them understand what this agenda is, make sure they understand the moves, help them understand that this is about the actions that they want to accomplish, the resources, the partners, any obstacles in the timeline. That's helping them be as specific as they can, and it's about working together. Followed by a stakeholder meeting where they can figure that out with their team, followed by opening statements facilitated by you, the facilitator. Then you shift to that informal meeting where it's in the corners of the room or in Zoom in a chat room, one member from every team, kind of having these sidebar conversations, a little more relaxed, speaking a little bit more plainly, perhaps, because we're away from that formal meeting. Then you might bring them back to the big group for another brief formal meeting, to send them only back to their stakeholder groups to process and share privately just with their group what the heck happened in those negotiating rooms. How does that adjust your priority actions? What's your tactic now? What has changed? Who's going to do what? So it offers them an opportunity to regroup, and then you send them back for another formal negotiations to present some closing statements, to offer to them what they would like to accomplish with the whole group, how their priorities have changed. You can also follow this second formal negotiation with another informal meeting as well. Depending on your time, you can expand this agenda to fit your need. And again, that's another part of this program that's really nice. The agenda is totally flexible. Sonia just facilitated this program with Cornell University with a class, and it was split up into 2 days. She did the introduction and some of the moves, stakeholder meeting and opening statements in one class, and then she returned 2 days later for finishing up the sim in a second class. And so that's where you can get shape it the way you need to. What are you going to do when you negotiate? What does that mean? Well, you're going to know who you are. You're going to know what your strengths and what you bring to the table, right? You're going to know what incentives you've got up your sleeves or disincentives. You're not going to be stupid. You're going to play within the confines of who you are. If you're the US, then you have a certain understanding of who you are. If you're a much smaller country that's dependent on the US, that's a different role to play. Know who's going to be friendly to you or who's not. Again, understand those different perspectives and those what competing interests are there. Understand that objectively, right? But think strategically. How can you use that for your benefit? And then know how fast things devolve, that you need to come up with these solutions as quickly as you can. This is what the stakeholder groups, when they prepare, these are the things that they're asked to do. Prioritize, negotiate, know who's going to speak on behalf of their group, form those alliances, and of course, negotiate. And I believe that is it. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And if I have any questions.
Lauren, you do have one in the chat. If you look, you can see the chat.
Yeah, I do. I just want to, while everyone's okay. I don't see. Actually, I don't see.
I'll read it. I'll read it to you. I have a question for Lauren whenever she gets
done talking.
Sorry.
Rambling.
To those participants who don't get enroll, or those who intentionally try to derail the process.
Oh. You know what's funny about that? I rarely have that happen with participants. The only time I have participants derail is when I'm doing a teacher training, and it's a teacher who wants to, like, oh, I'm really gonna throw you a curveball. It's really only instructors who have done that to me, which is kind of funny. Honestly, my style of facilitating is I take this very seriously with them. Welcome delegates, thank you for this meeting of the stakeholder groups present to discuss this very critical issue. And as I set that tone, I feel like that helps for the students to take it seriously, because oftentimes the students may or may not feel like they know what's going on. Like, I think I'm prepared, I'm not exactly sure what I'm doing. So when I kind of set it up as a very formal meeting and I'm taking this seriously, and I call upon the first group to offer an opening statement, which is a part of the first move, and I listen to them very seriously, and I may reflect back what they've done, what they've articulated, and I give it value and credibility, because it's often right on the money. It's right, it's often excellent. And once they've heard that, that makes them feel like, okay, all right, I get this. And I try to constantly give that reinforcement, because that reinforcement helps them get and commit. It helps them commit to their role, and it helps them take it seriously and do their best. That's what I find. I honestly don't have a lot of students derailing it. Anyone else?
Any other questions?
If I could do one thing, hold on, let me just do this, because I would like to just show everyone where they can go and get this.
Sure.
Okay, so I'm gonna pull this up. All right, I'm just gonna share my screen one more time, everybody. You want to remember the website address, diplomacy.state.gov, which is here. This is our homepage, diplomacy.state.gov. If you go, so there's a lots of resources on here of just like stories of diplomacy. We have some great, like if under exhibits, we have some great online exhibits that help to look at, in this case, some of the well, you can see the Camp David Accords, which we just celebrated at the anniversary.
Did everybody get to see the picture of Shirley Temple on the first slide?
Oh, what's that? You never did?
No. Did people notice Shirley Temple?
Oh, yes, Shirley Temple Black. Yes, she was an appointee. She was the first woman protocol chief of protocol. And she was also an ambassador to the UN. Right. Wasn't she? I'm pretty sure. Ghana, I think.
Ghana, not to the UN, but
not to Ghana. Okay.
Of course, she was also a child actress. That's what.
And she was well, of course. So in any event, there's lots of information here for you to peruse if your students are interested in, what does a diplomat do, and but here's where you would go for our simulations. Teach Diplomacy. We have launched 3 new historical sims: the Barbary Hostage Crisis of 1794, the Spanish-American Conflict of 1898, and the Suez Canal Crisis of 1956. So this is just another opportunity, and we're not asking students to play the real historical event. We want them where the scenario begins. In the case of the Spanish-American Conflict, it begins with the explosion of the USS Maine, for example. So we're not asking students to play it out the way it happened in history. We're asking them to play it and make the decisions and to use diplomacy in the way that they would want to solve that crisis. And then we have 10 hypothetical simulations that you see here. Then we have a teacher guide that you can download to read everything that I've just articulated. We also have a guide for students if you wanted them to read a little bit more of what's expected of them, in addition to what you may guide them to do. Each simulation, and I'm just going to leave it here, if you click into each tile of the cover, if you will, you're taken to a homepage for that simulation that gives a brief scenario of that simulation, so you can kind of see what you're getting yourself into, if you will. A bit about the State Department, in this case of the historical ones, what the State Department was in 1898. In the case of the global issues and the hypotheticals, it gives you a sense of how the State Department works on that global issue. But then here's the zip file. And when you hit that zip file, that's where all of the materials are. And they're broken up into scenario, roll sheets, worksheets. So it's all there for you, okay? And then for most of our simulations, not all, certainly for our historical sims, we have a playlist of videos that help prepare your students. And these videos are of historians, short clips, less than 2-minute videos here, everyone. And these clips give you a bit of the context to the history of what's going on, for preparing the students to play their roles. In the case of the history ones, we also have a couple clips that give you, what happened in the aftermath of, in this case, of the after the Spanish American War, sort of the Treaty of Paris. So most of the videos prepare students in their role, and then there's a few videos at the end that help them figure out, or little videos that give them a little bit of the history of what really happened. So most of our sims have the videos that help support the content of the simulation. The videos aren't about what their job is to do in the sim, it's just for the content. So diplomacy.state.gov. We also have social media that has lots of content about the State Department, its history, the practice, at Nomad Museum. If you wanted to follow us on Facebook and Twitter, we have some great stuff there. Again, just resources here about what is diplomacy, expert videos that help you understand about global issues, and then of course stories of diplomacy. And I think I will leave it there. And we're right at 2:05.
Fine. Questions?
Let me just stop sharing.
Okay. Questions for the American Museum. Is it? Wait a minute. What am I
We
getting?
call ourselves the National
Museum
of American Diplomacy, NAMAD.
Yeah. It used to be, what was it when you first opened it? It was
It's called the U.S. Diplomacy Center.
Yeah, I tell you, and it's I'm waiting. Where are you in the development of that space? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so the museum, we have a new director, an interim director who's really hoping that we're going to open by 2024.
Okay.
And we've just completed in sort of the design world, we've just completed the 65% exhibit design package.
Okay.
So now we're sort of moving along. We're also involved in a capital campaign because the government is not kind of funding this completely. This is a public-private partnership. Actually, those history sims that I just showed you were funded by a foundation.
Okay.
To produce those. And we've received a grant to host a teacher institute for local teachers this summer. Yep. So and then in addition, we also have since COVID, we also have another program that is viewed or broadcasted monthly called Diplomacy Classroom, which is hosted normally by me, and it has a diplomat or a historian or someone from our staff that is sharing about an object, and we host those, and the audience and the tone for that is really about come learn about the State Department and who we are and what we do and how we do it. It's not about current policy, it's about the practice and why it's important and how all of this impacts us here at home. And we hope the sims really help to teach that as well. So if you're following us on Facebook, you'll learn about the programs, and it's all free, so you can turn your students onto it as well.
It's really I always stress this idea that for what we do in Washington, we're often disconnected from the hinterlands of America. And making that connection is so very important, and what you do in that respect is vital. So those of you, I think a lot of those of us who are in the room today are kind of from suburban Washington, but I think about community colleges out in the middle of Kansas or someplace, wonderful place.
And I really appreciate, David, how you helped me connect to those colleges and those organizations. And any of you here, if there's someone that a colleague that you feel could benefit or would be interested, feel free to give them our information. David knows how to get in touch with me. David also does a really good job of pushing out our content and share that with you. Because we want that. We want to be able to connect beyond the Beltway.
People can subscribe because I get your monthly newsletter, which is always lots of stuff in there. So that's another thing that you can subscribe to that and see what's going on, and you can link through that. So,
and choose what you feel like your students might be interested in knowing. And we do simulations with students. We do host them. And if that's something that you would like, we can certainly do that. We literally, it's it's Sonia, me, and another colleague. It's just the three of us.
You are taking student groups now. You're back to taking
No,
live.
we're not. I mean, virtually, I
Oh,
guess,
okay.
virtually. Yeah. But, you know, we really like the train the trainer model because it just helps us have more people use our materials, as you can imagine. But if this is something that you feel like you would really like to bring, and I'm happy to have other conversations with you if you really are serious and you want to do this, and how I can support you in doing that
Okay.
and bringing the program to your classroom.